We talked about ISIS in the previous hour briefly. I just want to make a couple of points here that are, I think, really important to make. Whether we're talking about Hamas or Al Qaeda or the Taliban or the ISIS, the Islamic State, or Boko Haram, the one thing that all of these fundamentalist Muslim groups, and then you can toss in the right-wing Christians in the United States and around the world, the one thing that these people agree on is that women are second-class citizens. That's at the core of their activity and philosophy. And this, in Islam, this comes out of this Salafi worldview, which is the Muslim equivalent of, right-wing conservative Christianity. And that has been promoted by Saudi Arabia for, arguably since before the United States was a republic. Steve Clemens, writing over at The Atlantic, thank God for the Saudis and Prince Bandar, John McCain told CNN's Candy Crowley back in January. Thank God for the Saudis and Prince Bandar and for our Qatari friends. What he's talking about is that these, at the request of John McCain and Lindsey Graham, Prince Bandar got involved in giving a bunch of money and a bunch of weapons to a bunch of anti-Bashar al-Assad, the guy who runs Syria, a bunch of anti-Syrian government rebels. Those people that were supported by Saudi Arabia, well, this is to quote Steve Clemens in The Atlantic. The two of the most successful factions fighting Assad's forces are Islamic extremist groups, Jabhat al-Nusra and the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, the latter of which is now amassing territory in Iraq and threatening to further destabilize the region. And then he says, ISIS, in fact, may have been a major part of Bandar's covert ops strategy in Syria. The Saudi government, for its part, has denied allegations, including claims made by Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, that it directly supported ISIS. And, it just goes through this. It gets very interesting. And then this led to a piece by Ed Hussein on August 22nd in the New York Times titled, Saudis Must Stop Exporting Extremism. And Ed writes, let's be clear, Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, Boko Haram, the Shabab, and others are all violent Sunni Salafi groups. For 5 decades, Saudi Arabia has been the official sponsor of Sunni Salafism across the globe. And it was Sunni Salafis who took down the towers in 9/11. And, again, they only represent 3% of the world's Muslims. It's a very, very tiny minority within Islam. Just like fundamentalist Christianity is a very tiny minority within Christianity. Although, and then it goes on to say they've been lavishly supported by the Saudi government, which has appointed emissaries to its embassies in Muslim countries who proselytize for Salafism. And Saudi Arabia is a Salafi country. He points out just since August 4th, 19 people have been beheaded in Saudi Arabia, nearly half of them for nonviolent crimes. And then you wonder why Salafi groups like ISIS are beheading people. Well, it's because they're sponsors. Saudi Arabia does. They're patron. He notes that textbooks in the New York Times, Ed Hussein notes, textbooks in Saudi Arabia's schools and universities teach this brand of Islam. If ISIS is detonating shrines, it learned to do so from the precedent set in 1925 by the House of Saud with the Wahhabi-inspired demolition of 1,400-year-old tombs in the Jannat al-Baqi cemetery in Medina. See, ISIS is opposed to tombstones because these are graven images. Can't have tombstones with Salafi Islam, just like, fundamentalist Baptists can't dance. People say, well, fundamentalist Christians were never that, evil and destructive. Not quite the case. Go back and read the history of the Puritans and the Pilgrims when they came to North America back in the 1600s and how enthusiastically they were involved in killing Native Americans and calling it God's work. Granted, modern fundamentalist Christians are not so much, although it's the fundamentalist Christians in Uganda who are saying, hey, kill the gays. So I'm just saying. It's time for us to wake up.